In the previous video, we established the orientation of the trust workspace, the purpose of the trust, the roles involved, and the opening context. But once that foundation is in place, the next question becomes much more structural. What actually holds the trust together over time? That is the role of trust architecture. In this video, we will look at how the Equity Steward framework defines that architecture, how roles, powers, and structural relationships are recorded so that the trust remains intelligible and governable across years and potentially across generations. This is what we refer to as trust architecture. If stage 1 establishes the opening context of the workspace, stage 2 begins to formalize the internal structure of the trust itself. This is where broad intention starts to take defined shape. The focus here is not simply on collecting information, it is on expressing the structure clearly, documenting governance choices, and preserving a coherent record of how the trust has been designed. These architectural decisions also become part of the trust's administrative timeline, forming an early part of the trust's recorded governance history. Purpose of Stage 2. The purpose of this stage is to define the trust's working architecture in an organized and reviewable way. That includes the form of the trust, the way beneficial interests are expressed, and the powers held by trustees, and the governance rules that determine how decisions are made. A trust may exist in principle, but in practice its strength depends on whether its structure is actually understood, articulated, and recorded clearly. Stage 2 is designed to support that clarity. By capturing the trust's architecture explicitly, the platform creates a structural reference point against which later administration can be understood. Trust form selection. One sort of the first elements in this stage is trust form selection. The platform allows the user to identify the form of trust being operated, whether that is discretionary, bare life interest, charitable, accumulation and maintenance, purpose trust, or another recognized form. The value here is not simply choosing from a list. The value is that the selected form becomes part of the administrative record. Guidance is available alongside each option so that the form being recorded is consciously selected rather than assumed. Over time, that clarity helps explain the structural framework within which the trust operates. The chosen form becomes one of the early architectural entries in the trust's administrative history. Beneficial interest allocation. The next major part of this stage is beneficial interest allocation. This is where the user defines how interests within the trust are distributed or intended to vest. Depending on the structure of the trust, that may involve percentages, conditions, timing, or vesting arrangements. Again, the key point is not merely that these matters are understood privately. The key point is that they are recorded in a structured and reviewable format. Over time, administrative coherence is strengthened by being able to see what the intended beneficial position was and how it was expressed within the trust structure. When later decisions occur, they can then be understood in relation to the beneficial framework recorded here. Trustee powers. The platform also allows trustee powers to be defined. These may include powers of investment, advancement, appointment, accumulation, maintenance, and other operational powers relevant to the trust. This matters because trustee actions over time should correspond with the authority they are understood to hold. When those powers are clearly recorded, the administrative history of the trust becomes easier to interpret. Later, governance actions do not appear as isolated events. Instead, they can be understood within the framework of authority established at this stage governance rules. Stage 2 also includes governance rule setting. This is where the trust's internal decision-making method can be expressed and documented. For example, a trustee may determine that certain decisions require unanimity, while others may proceed on a majority basis, meeting cadence, quorum requirements. And the structure of decision-making can also be recorded here. This is an important part of disciplined administration. Governance is one of the areas where informal practice often drifts over time. By recording the intended method of governance early, the platform establishes a clear reference point for later conduct. Those governance rules then form part of the architectural context against which future decisions are recorded. Why architecture matters. So at this stage, what is emerging is more than a collection of configuration choices. What is being built is a structural record. It becomes possible to see not only what the trust is for, but how its internal logic is intended to operate. Who benefits, in what way, under what conditions, what powers trustees hold, how decisions are meant to be taken, and how the trust is intended to function in practice. That level of organized structure supports both current administration and long-term continuity. Later, trustees, beneficiaries, or advisors are able to see how the trust was originally designed to operate. Architecture lock, one of the most important features of this stage, is the ability to lock the architecture once it has been finalized. When the user confirms that the structure is settled, the platform generates an integrity hash for that architecture. This preserves the structure as a fixed version. If changes are required later, they do not overwrite the original record. Instead, they create a new version while preserving the earlier structure. This creates a clear audit trail of how the trust's architecture has evolved. That distinction between original structure and later revision is important for maintaining the integrity of the administrative record. Versioning and structural narrative. Versioning is not introduced to create unnecessary complexity. It exists to preserve clarity over time. Trusts often evolve, circumstances change, parties change, needs change, but if structural changes occur without a clear record of what existed before, the trust's administrative history becomes difficult to interpret. By preserving earlier architectural versions and clearly recording later changes, the platform maintains a coherent structural narrative. These versioned architectural events also appear in the trust's administrative timeline. This allows anyone reviewing the record to see when structural changes occurred and how the trust's design developed over time. Practical use of Stage 2. In practical terms, this stage provides trustees with a stable structural reference. Later, administrative actions can be understood in relation to the architecture recorded here. Decisions recorded in governance stages, asset movements recorded in funding stages, and documentation assembled in later stages all remain anchored to the structural framework defined in Stage 2. This is where the trust begins to take a stable administrative shape. So that is Stage 2 of the Equity Steward platform. Trust architecture is where the internal logic of the trust is formally expressed, recorded, and preserved. It gives structure to beneficial interests, trustee powers, and governance rules, and it allows that structure to be locked and versioned with integrity. In the next video, we move into stage 3, documentation assembly, where the trust's instruments and supporting records are organized within the workspace.